Okay, welcome. This is my fourth presentation on presuppositionalism. I'm going to check YouTube real quick to make sure everything is live. Okay, we're going live now. Sounds a little, my audio seems a little off, unfortunately. Testing it right now. This is my new headset. Yeah, shoot. Let me, yeah, it sounds crackly. I'm going to adjust my mic here. See if this sounds any better. Yeah. Huh. Strange. Is this better? Okay, that sounds better, I think. I think this is better. Yeah, this is nice, crackly. Yeah, okay, good. How do I sound, guys? Mike sounds better now? Yeah, I had to switch. I had to, yeah, I had to adjust the mic I'm using. Crackling skull. Okay, great. All right, I think I'm ready to start now. If the audio looks bad or anything looks bad, I can appreciate you guys just message me, let me know. Okay. All right. As my presentation shows, this is my part 4 of my series on presuppositionalism. If you haven't seen the first 3, I definitely recommend watching them, or go back later and watch them. They're all on my YouTube channel. I originally they were hosted on other channels, and I mirrored them on my channel. And this is actually the first one where I'm actually doing straight from my channel itself. It's the first time I've done that, and hopefully I'll be able to manage that. StreamYard is fairly easy to use, so hopefully all will go well. And by myself today as well. I had other guests with me last time, but today I'm going solo. I have quite a bit of content, so maybe hopefully that'll make it go faster, because when I have more people, that tends to stretch it out more. So let me start with my presentation, and we'll get going. All right. All right, so this is my part 4 of my critique on presuppositionalism. I'm going to focus on mainly on 2 topics. That's the Münchhausen trilemma and the argument from reason. Obviously, I'll go over what those things are. So, where I left off on part 3, this is a rehash from part 3. I mentioned that when you debate presuppositionalists, a common tactic they use is they always try to be on the offense and attack their opponent's worldview by always asking questions and never answering questions about your own worldview. So always just bring up the problems of your opponent's worldview and try to divert away from your own worldview. So it's something you got to keep an eye on. They'll often offer a external critique on their opponent's worldview while demanding an internal critique on their own, saying, no, you need to find inconsistencies within my worldview. You need to accept the presuppositions of my worldview. But will they do that with yours? So it's a double standard that they commonly do. And no matter what's being discussed, they'll always divert the conversation back to how do you make sense out of the world of what you're talking. So basically, they're going to bring it back to the presuppositional level. Start with your, make you talk about your presuppositions. So this is the common tactic that I'm going to focus on now. Common tactic is they bring up some sort of philosophical problem and claim that your opponent's inability to solve the philosophical problem invalidates their position. And when you're asked to solve the problem, you evade, try to keep attacking their worldview, and not being willing to for not being willing to answer first. So, and when pressed, they will end up giving a circular argument. Then they try to claim that it's virtuously circular, which is no such thing. It's still fallacious. I'm going to go over the first philosophical problem that usually creeps up. And that usually has to do with knowledge. Like, how can we have knowledge? What is knowledge? How can you have knowledge based on your worldview? Of course, just to mention with Greg Bahnsen, he said there's you're not going to, there's no way to be neutral, and they're not going to be neutral. And again, the presuppositionalists will, his motivation is not to change minds, but to shut mouths. So again, you have to question whether you want to talk to these people at all. If really their motivation is to shut mouths and not really have a constructive conversation. Not all are like that, but again, Greg Bahnsen, who a lot of these people, a lot of these presuppositional apologists learn from, is stressing this. They want to shut mouths. All right, so the philosophical problem I want to bring up, which usually comes to play when it comes to knowledge, is called the Münchhausen Trilemma. It's also known as the Agrippa Trilemma. But what it is in epistemology, again, epistemology is the theory of knowledge. It's a branch of philosophy which has to do with knowledge, defining what is knowledge, what counts as knowledge. Can we have knowledge at all? It deals with those sort of questions. So in epistemology, the Münchhausen trilemma is an argument used to demonstrate the impossibility of proving any truth, even in the fields of logic and mathematics. It points out that there are only three options when providing further proof in response to further questioning. Either you're going to end up with a circular argument where at some point the theory and the alleged proof support each other. So it's a circular argument where you're assuming your conclusion. A regressive argument where the proof relies on a more basic proof, which in turn relies on even more basic one, and so on in infinite regress. So it's going to result basically in an infinite regress. That how do you know that? Well, okay, whatever answer you give for that. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? It goes on to infinity. And then third is an axiomatic argument, where the proof stems from a number of axioms or assumptions which are not justified to prove themselves. So either you're going to start at some unjustified starting point, you're going to have an infinite regress, or you're going to argue yourself in a circle, regardless of what you try to prove. This aligns with different theories of knowledge. For example, the circular argument is aligned with coherentism. And coherentism is a theory of knowledge where there's a web of beliefs that justify each other. So one belief justifies the other, which justify the others, which justify the other. So all those beliefs cohere with each other into a systematic relationship. There's problems with all these epistemic theories. A common problem with coherentism is you can have a separate set, and I think Bertrand Russell pointed this out. You can have a separate set of coherent beliefs that are contradictory to another one, and both are coherent, both match each other. But how do you tell which one's right? Another one is infantism. So it's based on, it aligns with the regressive argument where beliefs are justified in infinite regress. So the problem with that is that you never get to a resolution for what you believe, for what you're trying to justify. It just goes on and on and on. So it basically just says your justification for knowledge is open-ended. Basically, it just keeps on going and going. And then third, which is quite common, is called foundationalism, where justification is based on starting assumptions or presuppositions. And you'll hear that a lot, when dealing with presuppositionalists. And typically, for me at least, and for a lot of people, it starts with your properly basic beliefs. And again, I went over what properly basic beliefs are in my previous series, but they're things like taking a mind-independent reality for granted, assuming that other minds exist, that my senses and cognitive abilities are reliable, use of induction, the validity of deduction, so forth. Those are all properly basic, and they're foundational. You start with them. You don't try to justify them. If you actually try to justify them, you would go back to arguing in a circle. So you'd bring up the circular argument. From that, I'm going to play a YouTube video now, which kind of demonstrates this sort of thing in action. I had a debate years ago with a presuppositionalist named Brojo. He's a disciple of Darth Dawkins, believe it or not. And this debate is on my channel. You can watch it in full. I'm just going to show you some highlights and point out how the Münchhausen trilemma applies to common dialogues that you have with presuppositionalists. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, and I'm going to bring up Brojo debate here. Just a moment. Let me share, get back to StreamYard and share it. Share. Tab, Brojo, and share audio. If you don't hear the audio, for those who are watching, please let me know. I still have 4 people watching. So if you don't hear the audio when I start the YouTube video, please let me know. So here we go. So hopefully, okay, great. You can see that.
Now, when you say properly basic belief, now is this a belief that you just strongly hold to that there would be no evidence for?
Yeah, it's not something I can justify because it's a pre-rational belief in which I reason from. So that's one of the beliefs in which makes up rationality.
Sure. So we already hit the ground running with it, with your starting point, the way you see the world and how you view the world. You don't even have a justification for that belief. So every other thing that comes from your worldview is bankrupt. If you can't justify your starting point, there would be no means to justify any other point.
Well, okay, so you're claiming you can justify your presuppositions? Is that what you're saying?
No, I never said that. I'm just asking you because you say you had no justification for yours. So can you explain to me, if you have no justification for your starting point, how you could reason from how you could reason at all?
Well, you're bringing up basically the Münchhausen trilemma, that for any truth claim, you're going to be stuck with only 3 options. Either to justify that, you're going to have to argue in a circle, you're going to have an infinite regress, or you're going to have to rely on some axioms. And in this case, my properly basic beliefs, I'm just starting. I'm using them as a starting point, which would be an axiom.
So basically, you're already off the ground. You're not even off the ground. You're still on the ground. You haven't even built up yet. So if you cannot,
well, that is the ground. That is the ground right there.
That's where I
start from.
So you're an unjustified, unprovable, an assumption that you have not proven. Is your start? Let me ask you.
How could you possibly start? How could you possibly justify your starting point? What would you possibly use to justify your starting point? What could you use? So,
yeah. So there you can see Brojo basically brings up the third horn of the trilemma, that I'm starting with my properly basic beliefs and I'm unable to justify them. So his basic criticism is that I'm starting with I'm using like a foundationalism to as my epistemology. So I'm starting right with my properly basic beliefs, and his objection is that I can't justify them. So because I can't justify them, all beliefs that come from those beliefs are unjustified as well. So I can't have any knowledge at all in in my worldview, because my starting point is unjustified. So let's see how he handles it, and we'll see how effective he is. So let me go a little farther. And okay, I'm going to go to 807. Just a moment. Okay.
yeah.
You haven't even built. You basically built your house upon straws instead of stone. And the stone would be.
What would be the stone? Yeah, I'd like to know what would be the stone.
What you would base your knowledge off of. Sure, it would be the Christian God's revelation.
That would be your starting point, right? The stone, right? That's where you're starting from. A foundation.
It would be a justified belief. Yeah, it would be a justified starting point. Yes.
A justified starting. Well, in your worldview, do you have any justified starting points? I'd like to hear about them.
Yeah, I already gave you the rock, the stone that you would build your house upon that Jesus talked about. And that stone would be God's revelation. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So can you justify that starting point without using it? Because if you used it, that would be arguing a circle, right? And we don't want to do that. So without arguing a circle, can you justify your starting point?
This is, and I'll answer too. But let me just say this now. This is something that is constantly thrown out and constantly talked about. When you're arguing in a circle. I'm fully aware of that. Now, is all circular reasoning invalid? Is it all fallacious? No. What we're dealing with is a virtuous circle, a circle that actually does work in the Christian worldview. Now,
how does that work?
Now,
I never heard of. I actually heard of virtuously circular.
Sure, but let me just say.
I'm not aware of how that's valid within Aristotelian logic.
Is it not valid? Would you say it's not valid?
Yes, I would say all circular reasoning isn't valid.
So wait, how?
Because the reason why it's in.
I actually made a mistake right there. I said circular reasoning is invalid. That's actually incorrect. I should have said it's fallacious. Circular reasoning actually is structurally valid in form. Therefore A is actually valid in logic. The form is correct. If A, then A. It follows. If you have A, it follows that you have A. So actually, that is valid, but it's fallacious. And why it's fallacious is because you can prove anything with it. A can be anything, right? So so the reason by begging the question, circular arguments are fallacious, is that you can prove anything with them. So I was wrong to say invalid. I should have said fallacious, but I think we all know what we mean. Is just being a little technical here. But you'll hear from presuppositionalists that some arguments, some circular arguments have to be valid because everyone does it. So we should just accept it. No, I'm sorry. It doesn't go that way. It's just a limitation. It's just a epistemic limitation of we humans. So just because you're forced to do it doesn't mean that it is legitimate, and you should always avoid it. I don't try to justify my properly basic beliefs. If I try to justify them, I would argue in a circle. So our presuppositionists can't accuse me of circular reasoning because I'm not trying to justify them. I'm just leaving them unjustified, and that'll be their criticism. And that was Brojo's first criticism. I fully acknowledge that. I reached the end of my epistemic limits, but I don't try to justify them because I would argue in a circle. So let me continue that.
Valid is that with it, you could prove anything.
So wait, hold up. No, stop. If it's invalid, hold up. This is if it's invalid, that means there would be a valid option, right? So then now I'm trying to figure.
No, doesn't mean there'd be a valid option. If there is a valid option, it would be non-circular. So again, presuppositionists, they're certainty junkies. So they're like a first term philosophy student. There has to be an answer to something. I want to figure it all out. And that's what appeals to a lot of these young guys. That presuppositionalism and Christian, fundamentalist Christianity gives them, certain black and white answers to all of life's questions. And so that's why it's a strong appeal to them.
How you're determining, because this would rely upon the laws of logic that we talked about earlier. This would depend upon the laws of logic.
You wouldn't use circular reasoning. You wouldn't use circular reasoning to validate it.
Would it be? Why not? Would that be a wrong form of argumentation? Because if that's the case, can you explain to me how you know anything to be true? Because in your worldview, I'm curious how you can know anything.
Well, I explain it.
Tell me how we know anything is true.
Yeah, so he's back to the Münchhausen trilemma again, where I'm relying on my axioms, and because I can't justify them, then I can't know anything to be true at all. So this is this philosophical problem with epistemology. So let's see how he solves this problem, and let's see how his Protestant Christianity solves this problem. So go a little farther now to 2045. Get back here. Bear with me. Okay.
Do you have answers in your worldview? Let's talk about.
No, I didn't see.
Oh no. Okay, so you only want to bring up philosophical problems and apply them to my worldview.
This is the problem.
But let's turn these philosophical problems on your worldview and see if you.
I would be willing to answer, but the problem is I'm asking you questions and you're just.
Well, I don't see how it matters. I don't see how my worldview makes a difference when we're talking about your worldview.
No, we were just.
Another Christian could be asking you these questions, right? Another Christian could simply be. You're a child.
Still trying to flip this on. See, now you're throwing out ad homs. This is just.
How is that ad hom? To ask questions? I'm not attacking him as a person. It's not ad hom.
No. I'm just willing. Do you want to have a fair conversation? We talked about my worldview. I answer a lot of your questions. Are you willing to address your worldview now?
Well, this is
what presuppers do all the time. They only want to attack the opponent's worldview, but when you turn the questions onto their worldview, they dive.
And at that point, he's actually sniped the Google Hangout. This was on Google Plus, and wasn't going well for him, so he actually sniped the whole Hangout. But you can see the tactic that was being used there, where he didn't want to talk about his worldview at all. He just wanted to attack mine, and he constantly tried to divert back, to my worldview. And when I forced him to talk about his worldview, what does he do? He actually sniped the whole Hangout. So yeah, so that's basically the Munchausen trilemma. Let me share my PowerPoint, and we'll continue again. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So another thing presuppositionalists will bring up to claim that they have their certain knowledge in their worldview is their epistemic theory is what some of them label as revelational epistemology. Basically, it's simply that they can know things because God reveals things to them. And God's infallible, and since God's infallible and all-knowing, we can have knowledge because of that. Where in the atheist worldview, there is no infallible God to reveal stuff to us. So here's a recent post on the Defending Presuppositionalism Facebook group that expresses this. So Daniel here, I'll read it to you, states, facts are related to one another. Okay. No fact about the world can be understood in isolation. Even a simple proposition like the apple is red must be put in relation to other propositions about apples, redness, colors, etc., in order to be understood and known. A proposition P requires propositions Q, R, and S to be known. Q and R and S likewise require other propositions, and so it goes. So you can see it can either go in a circle or infantism that we were talking about. Not only are the facts related, oftentimes ignorance about how certain facts relate to a particular fact result in mistaken interpretation and understanding of that fact. There have been many times when new information has come to light and changes I think, our understanding of something we strongly believed we knew. These observations have massive implications for epistemology. First, because of our infinitude, we are never able to comprehend the different relations between different facts exhaustively. There's always unknown facts and relations. Secondly, following the above, there's always the possibility, a high probability even, that when we don't know what we don't know undermines our basis for whatever we believe we do know. This leaves the door open for global skepticism. Every single one of our knowledge claims are subject to this undermining. It seems that we cannot answer the skeptic at all. But there is something to notice here. This is only the case if we reject revelational epistemology from the outset. Bringing the above points together, we can argue thusly: if revelational epistemology is not the case, then knowledge is impossible. Knowledge is possible, therefore revelational epistemology is the case. God reveals things to us is a necessary precondition of human knowledge, QED. So again, so his way out of the trilemma, so to speak, is this revelational epistemology. The problem is, and he brings it up himself, because of our finitude, we're never able to comprehend the different relations between different facts exhaustively. And he also mentions above, ignorance of how certain facts relate to a particular facts results in mistaken interpretation and understanding of that fact. I couldn't agree more. And what is the revelation he's talking about, that presupposition is talking about? Well, obviously it's revelation from God in form of general revelation, but also special revelation in the Bible. So it's interesting how he brings up mistaken interpretation. Think about all the Christians that have all these different interpretations of the Bible. So my question to the presuppositionalist is, how do you know your interpretation of the Bible is correct? we can take it for granted that your God exists and is revealing stuff to you, but it still has to go through your fallible, finite being, your senses and cognitive abilities. So how do you know your interpretation is correct? How do you know that you're properly receiving these facts? What tests would you use? How would you verify that? How would you justify that? Um, so um, uh, they're really in no better position than than the non-Christian. So again, he says himself, because of our finitude, we're never able to comprehend the different relations between different facts exhaustively. There are also unknown facts and relations. And you'll hear this, like I remember Eric Hovind said, um, you can't know anything unless you know everything, um, or unless you know someone who knows everything. So unless you're all knowing, you can't know anything at all, unless you know someone who's all knowing, who can reveal stuff to you. That's the general argument here. But you can see, how do they know that you're actually receiving knowledge from this all-knowing person? How do they know that person exists, and so forth? So, the problem is, it's not really where or in whom the belief originates, whether it's from a fallible person or an infallible being. That is a problem of uncertainty or causes a logical regress. It is who is having the belief, and that is us, the fallible beings. So let's look at all the things that they have to assume with no justification for their revelational epistemology to work. One, they have to assume that that this God exists, which is the very issue at hand here, and this God is not deceptive, which the Bible does mention that this God can be deceiving at times. So my question to them is, how do you know at any point that your God isn't deceiving you, since the Bible reveals that he does deceive people? And then three, if this God created us in such a way that we're able to receive divine revelations and correct information, and then four, that this God actually wishes to do those things. And then if of all those things hold, then we can know what we think we know. But how do they justify those four things at all, without arguing a circle, without infinite regress, without just assuming it? So again, we're back to the Münchhausen trilemma with them. So so in regards to revelational epistemology, the presuppositionalists have to rely on their own fallible and limited cognitive capabilities and senses as well. We are all in the same epistemic boat. The all-knowing being may have all the answers to everything that needs to be accounted for, but that doesn't mean that we fallible beings, both Christians and non-Christian alike, have all the answers. It is merely saying that there's actually an answer to all those things out there without actually knowing what they are. A non-theist can make the same claims if he wishes. So again, we're in the same epistemic boat. The truth can be out there, but it's up for us to discover us. But we're fallible and we're finite. So everything that exposes us from the externally is going to be filtered through our limitations. All right, so let me continue on. So this is a common tactic we'll hear from presuppositionalists. They'll ask you, how can you, in your godless worldview, justify anything you claim to know? And that's what Brojo challenged me. So are you going to appeal to some starting assumptions, presuppositions, or axioms? Well, those are unjustified. Those are the axiomatic argument. You use your reasoning to justify your reasoning? Well, that's circular. That's a circular argument. And because of X, well, how do you know that? How do you know that you know that you know that you know that? And that's a regressive argument. So again, we're back to the Münchhausen trilemma. But are they in a better epistemic position? Well, we can counter and do the same. We can ask them, how can you, in your Christian worldview, justify anything you claim to know? Because you appeal to your starting presuppositions of the Christian God? Well, that's unjustified. Oh, you use your revelation to justify your revelation? Well, that's circular. Because your God makes it so? Well, how do you know that you know that you know that you know that? Well, that's a regressive argument. So you can see it's in they're in no better position. With this revelational epistemology, basically they're basically have an externalist-based foundationalism that they start from. And again, it's the same problem, with the non-Christian position. I consider myself an externalist as well. But to justify them, again, either it's just going to be axiomatic or circular, or you're going to be stuck in an infinite regress. So, so typically the tactic. This makes me think of Cornelius Van Til. He's kind of like the father of presuppositionalism, so to speak. He brings up this very problem. When presuppositionalists use the Bible to support their claims, he writes, "Who wishes to make such a simple blunder in elementary logic as to say that we believe something to be true because it is the Bible? Our answer to this is briefly that we prefer to reason in a circle to not reasoning at all. We hold to be true that circular reasoning is the only reasoning that is possible to the finite man." So here, basically Cornelius Van Til, admits that you're going to end up arguing in a circle, and that's all us limited humans can do. But again, I recommend not trying to justify your properly basic beliefs, your starting foundations. Just leave them unjustified. It is taken on faith, because those are your starting points. So again, you won't be caught arguing in a circle if you don't try to justify them. So simply don't try to justify them, or you're going to end up like Van Til here. So what presuppositionists try to do to debunk other worldviews is try to bring a what's called a transcendental argument. And you probably heard a tag, the transcendental argument for the existence of God. What exactly is a transcendental argument? It's not necessarily about transcendentals. Matt Slick tried to make that claim that a transcendental argument is about transcendentals. No, not exactly. What a transcendental argument is that for some x, it states that some x is a necessary condition for the possibility of a given y. Given that if that y is the case, it logically follows that x must be the case too. So if you have y, x is necessary for y to exist, for y to be about. So if you accept y, then you're forced to accept x, because x is necessary for y to be about. So it's where y is normally given to be some fact about us or the world which we accept and or take for granted. So we accept y, we believe y exists, so x must be the case. They typically appeal only to an a priori knowledge, what we can know without an appeal to experience. So that's what kind of separates the transcendental argument from other arguments, because a lot of arguments are the same, saying, well, if you have y, then you must have x. You can apply that to a lot of things, but for the transcendental argument, it's more for a priori knowledge, and it seeks to answer skepticism by showing that the things doubted by the skeptic are in fact preconditions for the skepticism to make sense, and arguing for the necessary preconditions of intelligible experience. So that's what transcendental argument usually is defined as. So the presuppositionalists claim that every other worldview that excludes the Christian triune God does not offer the preconditions that are necessary for what we accept to make reality intelligible. And that are things like the laws of logic, the use of induction and mind-independent reality, other minds, objective morality, knowledge, which we went over, the reliability of our senses and cognitive capabilities, capacities, and so forth. So, they're claiming all those things that that we use on a daily basis to make sense of the world relies on the triune God of Christianity existing. And again, that's what they need to have to try to prove. So how do they actually try to go about trying to prove that? Well, to do that, they have to basically debunk, they have to falsify every other worldview, which is quite a challenge. And again, I recommend going back to part 3, where they try to kind of lump all other worldviews into one non-Christian worldview. So again, I recommend part 3, so I'm not going to repeat myself there. But normally they debate atheists or agnostics, basically non-theists. So they basically try to debunk atheism. And one argument I see over and over and over again is, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot my last point here. Yeah, so they always claim, my worldview is true because of the impossibility of the contrary. And what that means is, since it's impossible for their God not to exist, that and that all other worldviews are impossible, therefore Christianity must be true. That's just another way of saying that my God's necessary. If something's necessary, then the opposite, then the negation of it, is impossible. That's what it means for something to be necessary. They can say that, but they have to prove it. They just can't say, oh, well, Christianity, my God must exist. My God is necessary because of the impossibility of the contrary. Well, that would be the case, but you need to actually show the impossibility of the contrary. You need to demonstrate that. So one argument I see over and over and over again that's become quite popular is what's called the argument from reason. And the argument, it's argument against atheistic positions such as naturalism, materialism, physicalism, and determinism. And it basically defines these atheistic positions such as naturalism or materialism as that nothing supernatural exists. So, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in anything supernatural, that there's no gods, no souls, no heaven, etc. That everything that exists is either some form of physical stuff or is fully explained in terms of physical stuff. And 3, that the whole of reality is interlocked in the sense that everything that occurs in nature is part of a closed, deterministic causal system. I can buy one. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could be an atheist and perhaps still believe in souls. You can believe in ghosts. So that doesn't necessarily hold. I would say, yeah, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in any God. So I can give them that. 2, everything that exists is physical stuff. Well, yeah, if you're a physicalist or a materialist, perhaps that's the case. But you could be a Platonist, so you don't necessarily have to, be a nominalist or a physicalist. But I know, I would think, definitely some atheists are, lean towards naturalism or materialism or physicalism. I consider myself a naturalist, so okay, I'll go along with that. And then 3, that kind of like it's a closed deterministic causal system. Yeah, I kind of lean towards determinism, but again, you don't have to. There is quantum indeterminism, which I'll go over a little later. So it doesn't have to be deterministic, but yeah, I think this is kind of like these three things are kind of like a good definition of a stereotypical Western atheist, I guess. That that no supernatural exists, that all exists is matter in the universe, and everything's determined basically by the laws of physics. So that's basically what they're attacking. So this argument was made popular by C.S. Lewis in Chapter 3, the cardinal difficulty of naturalism, in his 1947 book Miracles. In 1948, Elizabeth Anscombe criticized the argument, in which Lewis conceded to some of the points. In 1960, Lewis released a second edition, revising the chapter in argument. Elizabeth Anscombe and other philosophers criticized it again after Lewis's death in 1963. The argument from reason was named by one of Lewis's critics, philosopher John Beversluis, in his book C.S. Lewis and the Search for a Rational Religion. I recommend that book, by the way, if you want to learn about C.S. Lewis's arguments and so forth. And there's been later versions of the argument from reason from Victor Reppert, William Hasker, and Alvin Plantinga with his evolutionary argument against naturalism. So let me make sure, let me go to a YouTube feed. Again, I'm just by myself today, so I kind of have to be the producer and the host at the same time. So let me make sure everything good. If you guys can let me know on the side chat for the 8 people watching if things are coming through okay. If the sound's okay and everything. Let me appreciate. Okay, I think it sounds okay. Let me continue on. Sounds good from what I can hear. So I will continue. Pull my presentation. Okay, so C.S. Lewis's claim is that if thought can be fully explained in terms of non-natural causes, rational inference cannot be valid. So if naturalism is true, then human reasoning is not valid because no derived conclusion is derived rationally. So for any belief B, if B has a complete mechanistic explanation, then B cannot also have any rational explanation. So, and again, put another way, if naturalism is true, then every event has a complete mechanistic explanation. So any other explanation will be superfluous. The mental must not be ultimately causal operative, because on naturalism, the mental is trifle, which this last one I totally disagree with. So Lewis argues that that reason could not be emerged from non-reasoning matter by means of an evolutionary process, that naturalism cannot account for the way thoughts can be about things, which is known as attentionality in philosophy, and a rational supernatural being must exist to account for why humans can reason. He further asserts that rational thought is not part of the system of nature, and that human reason must have a top root in an internal, self-existent, rational being whom we call God, in which the human mind is illuminated by the divine reason, like Augustine claims. So let me break this down a little further so we understand it. So basically, Lewis is claiming there's two explanations for our reasoning. One is the ground consequent explanation, where we infer a consequent from a ground. So, for example, If A, then B, A, therefore B. That's a standard modus ponens argument. So we start with some grounds. So for example, if it rains, the street will be wet. It rains, so therefore the street is wet. So the ground is the rain, and the consequent is a wet street. So that's typically how we reason through the ground consequent explanation. And then there's a second explanation for our reasoning. That's the cause and effect, and that's a series of neural causes and effects. So so think of it this way. So that my eye's taken some sort of input, and it hits my retina, which sends impulses to my brain, which fires off neurons, and which goes through the synapses of my brain and goes through different neural networks and different regions of my brain. And eventually, each one of those causes has an effect, and that ultimately leads me to some conclusion. So those are two explanations for how we reason. So, for example, my wet street example, I look at I look out outside. I see it's raining. The input of and perhaps I don't see the street, and that hits my eyes. It goes in. It fires off all these neural effects in my brain. And from that, I reason that the street will be wet based on my further knowledge. So those are two explanations. What C.S. Lewis is saying is that these are mutually exclusive. So you could, if you can explain everything with cause and effect, the ground consequent explanation really doesn't matter. So you never actually reason at all, given naturalism. So Lewis's claims that the neurological cause and effect processes are non-rational. So if naturalism is true, the neurological cause and effect explanation is the fundamental one. So the naturalists cannot say that their conclusion was derived rationally. So I quote C.S. Lewis here, and again, this is from his book Miracles, chapter 3. Now, a train of reasoning has no value as a means of finding truth unless each step in it is connected to what went before in the ground consequent relation. If our B does not follow logically from our A, we think in vain. If what we think at the end of our reasoning is to be true, the correct answer to the question, why do you think this, must be the ground consequent because. On the other hand, every event in nature must be connected from previous events in the cause and effect relation, but our acts of thinking are events. Therefore, the true answer to why do we think this must begin with the cause and effect because. Unless our conclusion is the logical consequence from a ground, it will be worthless and could be true only by a fluke. Unless it is the effect of a cause, it cannot occur at all. It looks, therefore, as if in order for a train of thought to have any value, these two systems of connection must apply simultaneously to the same series of mental acts. But unfortunately, the two systems are wholly distinct. To be caused is not to be proved. And yeah, this is where I totally disagree with C.S. Lewis. They're solely distinct. No, one is dependent on the other. The cause and effect makes the ground consequent explanation possible. So I'm going to go more in detail about that, but they're wholly distinct. No, I totally disagree. So basically, put in a more syllogistic format. This is not C.S. Lewis's syllogism. This is one attempt to turn it into more of a formal argument. But it basically goes like this. One, no belief is rationally inferred if it can be fully explained in terms of non-rational causes. So your firing in your brain is considered to be non-rational. It's just following the laws of physics. So two, if naturalism is true, then all beliefs can be fully explained in terms of a non-rational cause. Three, therefore, if naturalism is true, then no belief is rationally inferred. Four, if any thesis entails a conclusion that no belief is rationally inferred, then it should be rejected and its denial accepted. And then five, therefore, naturalism should be rejected and its denial accepted. And like I said, I hear this argument over and over and over again, and I will demonstrate that. I will go out to YouTube again, and I will show you examples. The first is apologist Frank Turek. So let me stop sharing there, and I will share Frank Turek. Just one moment, let me pull it up. Start at one. All right, hold on. Again, now let me know if you don't hear the sound. So, okay, here we go.
God doesn't exist. They're stealing our ability to reason. Why should we be able to reason about things outside of our skulls if there's no God, if we're just molecular machines, if we're just moist robots? We shouldn't. But that's what they say we are. We're moist robots. So why should we believe anything they say? So
that's Frank Turek. And next, we will hear from Cy ten Bruggencate in his debate with Matt Delahunty. So let me pull that up. Share it here. Okay, if you can hear the audio, please let me know. Thanks.
Said so far is borrowing from my worldview. You can't know anything to be true unless you start with God. Everyone here knows that God exists. Why don't I present evidence? Why don't I present evidence? Where do you hear evidence out in the world? In the court of law. Who do you present evidence to in court? The judge. When you come up to me and say you don't believe in God, and I present you with evidence, I'm saying that you're the judge. You're not the judge.
You're a little farther up here.
If biochemical reactions are all that you are thinking, then all that you can say is that what you perceive to be logically true and absolute and necessary is nothing more than the result of chemical reactions in your brain.
Agreed. Matt agrees that his view on logic is a result of the chemical reaction in his brain. I mean, would you come here today and listen to a debate? It was a bottle of Dr. Pepper arguing against a bottle of Mountain Dew. You shake them up and you open them, and they start to fizz. Which of those fizzes would be true? Neither. It's just fizz. If Matt's worldview is true, then our thoughts, our brains are just evolved meat machines. And our thoughts are the byproduct of the chemical reactions in our evolved brains. It's brain barf. He would be fizzing atheistically, I'm fizzing theistically. And you want to know which one of those is true. You can't get truth from that. You see, Matt's view on logical absolutes, as far as he knows, could be fed to him from a computer when he's a brain in a vat.
Okay, yeah, so there's a few points there. If you recognize that caller, initially. That was Matt Slick calling into the atheist experience. But Side 10 says, well, which is true, the fizz of Dr. Pepper or the fizz of Mountain Dew? And he correctly says, well, neither. Yeah, that's right. Objects are not true. Propositions are true. So what he's calling brain barf and so forth, well, those fizzes in our brain, so to speak, is what brings about propositions, whether they're true or not. So that's simply the mechanism in which we are capable of reasoning. If he doubts that, then why do we even have brains in the first place? So again, these are reactions in our brains, which through our neural network, we're able to create true propositions. So again, fizz is not true. Yes, propositions are true. But this brain fizzing, this brain barf that he derogatorily calls it, is what's necessary. Is the mechanism in which our brains does reason. At the end, he brought up, how do you know these things aren't being fed into your brain from a computer? Well, again, that's kind of non sequitur. I mean, you can put, it's basically bring up the problem of solipsism there. It's unrelated to this problem. He's just throwing that in. He could be a brain of that as well. And the main science, in the mad scientist, is feeding thoughts of Christianity into his brain as well. So he just threw this in there, but it has nothing to do with the argument for naturalism. I just wanted to point that out. So here is the argument from reason again in a different form. And the caller, Matt Slick, he brought it up as well. And I have another one. Hold on. All right, that's Side 10. That's Frank Turek. Okay, next we're going to hear from Greg Bahnsen, the champion of presuppositionalism himself. So let me pull up Greg Bahnsen. Close that down. Where is Greg Bahnsen? Here's Greg Bahnsen. One moment. Let me share this one. Share.
Another aspect of this question, why be rational at all? If the person you're talking to is really a materialist, then they have a naturalistic explanation for everything that we think and do. The naturalist says, what's going on in this gray matter in my cranium is controlled by the laws of physics and chemistry and biology. I don't really think. I'm just like a weed that's growing. And this particular weed expresses itself through vocal cords and all that, but nevertheless, weeds don't think and make decisions, and neither do I. We're all subject, basically, to the laws of physics. I'm just at a more complicated level, a more complex level. So if naturalism is true, then there is no mind, and there is no objective reasoning, and no freedom to my thought. And so if naturalism is true, why do you call on people to be rational? If naturalism is true, there is no rationality. There's just whatever people end up thinking and doing. Atheism destroys the demand for rationality.
All right, so that was Greg Bahnsen. So you can see the argument from reason is used over and over again, slightly different here and there, but they're all making the same points. So let me pull up my PowerPoint again. All right, so Yeah, so you saw those videos, you heard Matt Slick, and this is on Matt Slick's CARM website. Title of the page I got this from is called "Naturalism is Self-Refuting." There's the link right there. On it, Matt Slick states, "Naturalism is self-refuting because it undermines the foundation for proper logical inference by restricting the human brain to operation within the properties of the physical laws, yet physical laws do not produce proper logical inference. Naturalism undermines the rational basis for proper logical inference because it reduces rational processes to neurochemical reactions of the physical brain. So atheistic naturalism is ultimately self-refuting." So, so that's the claim. So that's a basic claim. You know, and you heard that from basically Greg Bonson and C.S. Lewis and so forth. So, but to me, this is a non sequitur, and let me go into a little bit more detail here. Okay. I actually have a little bit more to give. Okay, and I think you heard this from Greg Bonson. You know, we'll say, well, you know, from naturalism, from materialism, it also implies determinism. So, you know, everything's determined by, you know, the laws of physics, right? That everything's an effect, and every effect has a cause. So, you know, whatever you do now was determined by previous causes, you know, so forth and so on, back to the Big Bang. John C. Eccles, hopefully I'm saying that right, writes, "I state emphatically that to deny free will is neither a rational nor logical act. This denial either presupposes free will for for the deliberately chosen response in making that denial, which is a contradiction, or else it is merely the automatic response of a nervous system built on a genetic coding and molded by conditioning. One does not conduct a rational argument with a being who makes the claim that all of its responses are reflexes, no matter how complex and subtle the conditioning." So basically what you're saying is, well, to be able to reason, we must have free will. That libertarian free will must be the case for us to be reasoning. Because if it's determined by the laws of physics and so forth, then it's not reasoning at all. And again, this is what, you know, C.S. Lewis said initially. And again, you'll hear this. I know a lot of Christians want to believe we have free will as well, because if everything was determined, then we wouldn't be guilty of sin, right? So it becomes a moral issue. So, you know, if things were just determined in the past, then we can't be held accountable for our sins. So that's why they believe in free will as well, as far as this reasoning. And we'll hear this again from our next apologist, William Lane Craig. So let me pull up William Lane Craig now. All right, here's William Lane Craig on determinism. Pull it up. Okay, share audio.
Worse than that, Mr. Zindler is a determinist, and therefore everything that he thinks is just like, say, having a toothache or a limb growing a leaf. There is no truth to it. It's just all determined. So how do you know that the views that you hold to aren't simply the result of physical stimuli rather than rationality? I think that atheism is ultimately destructive of rationality itself.
Mr. Zindler.
All right, so that's William Lane Craig making the same claim that atheistic determinism's true, then we can't reason as well. So let me pull up my PowerPoint again. All right. So how to respond to this? Philosopher David Kyle Johnson writes, if the mind and the brain are not just one, not one and the same thing, many philosophers think they are, the mental is at least an emergent property of the brain that arises due to its complexity. You can hinder or prevent mental process by hinder and preventing brain processes. And in general, you cannot affect one without affecting the other. Such relationship is called a supervenient relationship. Mind, we would say, supervenes on brain. Given the supervenient relationship, the mutual presence of cause, effect, and grounds explanations are not just grantable, but inevitable. The grounds explanation supervenes on neurological cause and effect explanations. Thus, contrary to Lewis, is not the case that you can remove the grounds without altering the conclusion drawn by the cause and effect process. To remove grounds, one would have to alter the physical process, which would alter the conclusion drawn by the process or prevent the process altogether. To affect one is to affect the other. You cannot subtract grounds without affecting the neurons. So, yeah, so this is why I point out earlier, Lewis claims that if naturalism is true, you could simply remove the mental and the physical cause and effect would all be the same. No, that's not true at all. If you changed, if you messed around with your brain or cause some sort of disruption, that would change your reasoning. And the different thoughts that come in your brain, it could come in from your senses or just through your own thoughts, that fires off other neurons in your brain, which with the cause and effect, which brings about other thoughts as well. So so the ground consequent explanation supervenes on top of the purely physical cause and effect explanation. You cannot change the one and not change the other. Where C.S. Lewis was saying, "Oh, they're totally distinct from each other." No. They're tied together. One is not possible without the other. So John Beversloss writes, "A full explanation is one that satisfies a questioner's query." So there can be different kinds of full explanations depending on what the questioner wants to know. As we've already seen, Anscombe, in this case, distinguishes 4 kinds of explanations: causal, logical, psychological, and personal history. Having done so, she argues that Lewis mistakenly assumes that since causal explanations fully explain an event, all other explanations are superfluous because there is nothing left to be explained. Anscombe is right. From the fact that there is a cause of every event, including mental events, it does not follow that a person cannot have a reason for what she believes. Having asked for and received an explanation in terms of causes, we can always ask a further explanation in terms of grounds and reasons, even if the previous explanation fully explained the matter under discussion causally. So is determinism self-refuting, like William Lane Craig claims? Patricia Smith Churchland writes, if determinism is correct, it does not follow in the least, it does not follow in the least, it does not in the least follow that we do not reason. On the contrary, what follows is that our reasoning and our reasoned behavior is causally produced. So far from denying that humans are purposeful and reasonable, determinism is a thesis that there is a causal network which produces such behavior. And think of the opposite of that. If our reasoning is not causally produced, if it's not actually determined by cause and effect, then is it just random? What does it mean to have free will, to freely reason? Is that to freely reason? What does that actually mean? Does that mean that we come up with any explanation? That it's chaotic? That our thoughts are random? I think it's just the opposite from what these Christians are claiming. If free will is the case, how exactly do we reason? Imagine if you said to me that the Statue of Liberty is in New York. Well, okay, you make those utterances. They hit my eardrums, which vibrate my ears, nerve endings, which go to my brains. It fires off different neurons and parts of my brain, and it goes to my memory, and my memory brings up that New York is in the United States. So from that, I'm able to infer that the Statue of Liberty is in the United States. All that was causally determined by someone uttering the initial proposition that the Statue of Liberty is in New York. All that was a response. All that was a reaction. My inference, my reasoning was a reaction to someone uttering that first statement. That's all causally determined and cause and effect. But how does that undermine rationality? How does that undermine logical, rational inference? I don't think it undermines it all. I think it's a good account for how physical humans are able to reason and have logical inferences. And again, what does it mean to have free will, to be able to reason with free will? What does that actually mean? Is it just chaos? I don't think it really makes much sense to say, oh, we have to have free will to be able to to reason. It makes more sense to me that reason is deterministic, since valid conclusions follow necessarily from certain premises. So you can see it's one event leading to the other, which is determined through our evolutionary process of how our minds come about. And just, again, what does it mean to say we have to be free to reason? This sounds like chaos and random thoughts. If we say, oh, we have to have free will. So I don't think that really helps their case at all. John Beversloss states it seems never to have occurred to Lewis that the problem to which he devoted so many pages can be avoided simply by asserting that brain processes are causally necessary conditions of acts of rational inference. Yeah, I mean that is the cause of our rational inference. And another thing to bring up: does naturalism imply determinism? Well, there's something called quantum indeterminism. So it doesn't necessarily, might not necessarily be the case that determinism is true. There's the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which states that the position and the velocity of an object cannot be measured exactly at the same time, even in theory. The very concepts of exact position and exact velocity, therefore, together, in fact, have no meaning in nature. So, so if there's some truth in indeterminism, perhaps determinism isn't the case. So, it's it's still not clear whether determinism is true or not. I kind of lean towards determinism. Whether some sort of compatibilism is the case or not is open to debate. But I have no problem with if things are determined that we can also reason as well. Here's an analogy to think of it. In computing, there's something called the OSI model of computing. So we all use computers, and typically the end user, namely us, basically to see the top level, the application level. So so when we web browse out to a web to a website, we click on a link, we go to HTTP, so forth, and that's the application layer we see. But for all that to be possible, there's all these other layers below it to make it possible, all the way down to the physical layer. And at the physical layer, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros, right? It's just a bunch of on-offs. Electrical on, electrical off, or in the case of fiber optics, a light pulse on, or off. If you change those ones and zeros, those on and offs, yeah, you're going to affect all these layers above it up to the application level. And also, yeah, if you're a computer programmer or an end user, for example, and you let's say you click on something or enter a number into a web page, well, you're changing the application level, but that trickles down all the way down to the physical level. So by you inputting something into a web page, you're changing the physical layer. You're changing the ones and zeros all the way down to the physical layer. So this is the same thing, where it's analogous to the application layer would be considered the ground consequent layer, and the application layer, and then the physical layer would be considered the causal, cause and effect layer, the physical cause and effect layer. So you hear that a lot. We'll make a analogy to a computer. And you hear like Seitan said, oh, well, our brain is this fizzing stuff. Well, a computer is just, creating electrical impulses. But together, those electrical impulses mean something. And they come together all the way up to the application layer. So, what was one of C.S. Lewis's responses to what I just brought up from philosophers like Anscombe and other philosophers? This should sound familiar if you're familiar with how presuppositionalists respond. Lewis' response is, the evolutionary product which the naturalist has described could also be a power of seeing truth, i.e. a grounds explanation. The naturalist might say, well, perhaps we cannot exactly see, not yet, how natural selection would turn sub-rational mental behavior into inferences that reach truth. But we are certain that this is, in fact, has happened. For natural selection is bound to preserve and increase useful behavior. And we also find that our habits of inference are, in fact, useful. And if they are useful, they must reach truth. But notice what we're doing here. Inference itself is on trial. That is, the naturalist has given an account of what we thought to be our inferences, which suggests that they are not real insights at all. We and he want to be reassured, and the reassurance turns out to be one of more inference. And the reassurance turns out to be one more inference, if useful than true, as if this inference were not, once we accept his evolutionary picture, under the same suspicion as the rest. If the value of reasoning is in doubt, we cannot try to establish it by reasoning. So where have we heard that before? You are, in other words, you are using inferences to justify inferences, which is the very thing at issue here. You beg the question by answering my objection with an argument. So in other words, are you using your reasoning to justify your reasoning? How many times have we heard that from presuppositionalists before? So so what C.S. Lewis here is claiming, it's like, okay, you're defending, you're presenting a naturalistic argument by your reasoning. Well, that's the very thing in questioning. How do you know your reasoning is correct? Are you using your reasoning to justify your reasoning? Well, that is circular, but that has nothing to do with naturalism. You're just, both the naturalist and the presuppositionalist, supernaturalist, is assuming that their reasoning is valid. So this is not a argument against naturalism per se. This is just a skeptical argument against reasoning itself. It is circular to use your reasoning to justify your reasoning, but again, we're not justifying our reasoning with our reasoning. We're simply assuming it. We're taking it for granted, but offering our reasonings for why naturalism can explain why we are able to reason. And again, you hear this from presuppositionalists, and but again, it's not really an argument against naturalism. It's just a skeptical position against a reasoning altogether. I'll show another video which this is done. So we pull that up. One last. This is the last video. Let me pull it up here. Share.
How did he arrive at that conclusion that in his experience, his reasoning abilities are yielding true results? You see, he's using his reasoning abilities to bridge the gap between his experience and the fact that the conclusions drawn from that experience are true. But those are the same reasoning abilities that he can't trust. Let me give an example. Suppose Dr. Wielenberg were to say that in his experience, every time his senses have told him a car was red, and he concluded that it really was red, it turned out he was right. It really was a red car. How did he arrive at that last conclusion? In other words, how does he know that the car was really red? Did he go around and ask other people what they thought? If he did that, then how does he know he can trust their experiences? Did he scrape off a piece of the paint and expose it to some kind of scientific analysis? In order for that to be helpful, he'd need to be able to draw some rational conclusion based upon the chemical makeup of the paint. And there he goes, using those reasoning abilities again. See, Wielenberg's objection ends up being self-defeating. He can't argue that he has an independent justification for trusting his rational abilities without using those same rational abilities. So a so-called independent justification ends up not being independent at all.
So again, we hear this from presuppositions over and over again. How do you justify your reasoning without using your reasoning? Well, we have to use our reasoning, but we take it for granted that we do reason. But again, how is the Christian, how is the presuppositionalist immune from this? When he's analyzing the paint to determine that it's red, when he used the same test that he presented, and again, he would be using his reasoning to do those tests and so forth. Well, he has to assume that his reasoning is valid. Now, he has an explanation that he was made in God's image, and God gave him valid senses and reasoning capabilities, but his God didn't have to do that, right? And he's just offering a just so explanation. Well, we have our naturalistic just so explanation of why we're able to reason and see that a red car is actually red and so forth. Evolved through the evolutionary process. So, so that's not really an argument at all, as far as I'm concerned, as just against naturalism. You can apply that to to anyone that claims to be reasoning. Again, we're back to our properly basic beliefs, back to our foundational beliefs. So we're full circle back to the Münchhausen trilemma again, to how we're able to justify any of our true beliefs at all. So what this really boils down to, I think, is what in philosophy is the issue is basically the philosophy of mind. So in the philosophy of mind, I'm sorry, I think I'm not sharing. Yep, it might help if I share. Let me go back to, let me share my PowerPoint again. Apologize. All right, there we are. So philosophy of mind. So the mind-body problem addresses the relationship between thought and consciousness in the human mind and the physical brain. So basically, there's two camps when it comes to philosophy of mind. There's dualism, which is mind and body are distinct kinds of entities, and that mental phenomena are basically non-physical in nature. There's different kinds of dualism. There's substance dualism, property dualism, predicate dualism, and there's monism, where it asserts that mind and body are not distinct kinds of entities. And under that, there's physicalism, which is reductive and non-reductive; idealism, that the only existing substance is mental. There's neutral monism, that one substance that is neither mental nor physical, thus neutral, but is capable of mental and physical aspects or attributes. So if you want to learn more about these positions, I recommend, there's a great website. It's philosophybasics.com. So if you want a good introduction to all these different philosophical meanings and concepts, I recommend going out to philosophybasics.com and learn more about it. A lot of Western, your stereotypical Western atheists like myself tend to be monists, that our minds are just the emergent function of the physical brain. If you damage the physical brain, you're going to damage our mind. If you destroy our brain, you destroy our mind. So yeah, I am a monist. I'm not a dualist. And a lot of Western secular philosophers and who are naturalists and physicalists and so forth, tend to be monists. Gregory Basham, not to be confused with Greg Bahnsen. This is another critic of Lewis. Gregory Basham writes, by now it should be clear that Lewis's argument is not directed to all forms of naturalism, as that term is widely used today. His focus is on one, reductionistic naturalism, the view that everything that exists is either physical or reducible to physical, and two, epiphenomenalistic naturalism, the idea that everything that exists is either physical or a causal inert property, or epiphenomenal, or an epiphenomenon of what is physical. If Lewis were writing today, we would need to address broader forms of naturalism, including so-called emergentist and non-reductive varieties. Could it be that non-reducible and causally efficacious, boy, so apologize for not being able to pronounce that, non-physical things, thoughts, meanings, values, evidential grounds really exist, but only insofar as they supervene upon or are realized in physical structures. What would Lewis say to naturalists of this ilk? And again, David Kyle Johnson writes, one might think that these theories of mind come along too late for Lewis to account for them in 1960. But the notion of that the brain secretes the mental was suggested by Karl Vaught in the 1800s. Identity theory itself was first called such in 1933, and interest in identity theory of mind became prevalent in 1956. In fact, Lewis was aware of it in chapter 1 of Miracles, writing, the great interlocking event of nature might be such as to produce at some stage a great cosmic consciousness, and indwelling God arising from the whole process of human mind arises, according to the naturalists, from human organisms. It is unfortunate that Lewis did not realize how this theory threatened the argument of chapter 3. And that is my end. So again, yeah, the argument from reason is used over and over again by many different apologists, as you've seen on all the YouTube videos I've shown. It's good, if you're going to argue with apologists, I recommend learning about it and learning the counters to it and so forth. But yeah, a lot of it has to do, is with the philosophy of mind. Where is the mind and brain physically distinct? Does one supervene on top of each other? I think the mind emerges, is an emergent function of the brain. That if you affect the brain, you're going to affect the mind, and so forth. So the argument from reason is a go-to argument that a lot of presuppositionalists and a lot of other apologists like Frank Turk, you saw, and so forth, think is a great defeater and a real knockdown argument to use against atheists. So that's why I wanted to present it now. So all right, that's the end of my presentation. It's the end of part 4. I'm not sure if there'll be a part 5. Perhaps. It was. I think it's been a couple of years since I've presented this one. It's part 3. So we'll see. Let me check YouTube real quick. All right, I already have 4 people watching right now. So I guess from that, I will call it a day. And thanks for watching, and I hope this creates more discussion and dialogue, and I hope for people who are in the counter apologists, apologetics, who debate Christians and presuppositionalism, that this will be helpful. So that that's the end of my presentation. All right, take care and goodbye.